Welcome to Pacific Mammal Research's Marine Mammal Highlight Series. We are a 501c3 research and education nonprofit studying marine mammals in the Salish Sea off Washington State. In this series, you will learn about different marine mammals as we discuss interesting facts about each species. This is our way to geek out, share some information, and have some fun. We hope you enjoy the series, and be sure to follow us on Instagram to vote for which animal we talk about next. And without further ado, welcome to the PacMam podcast. I'm Cindy.
I'm Kat.
And I'm Trevor.
And this week is with the poor gray seal lost again. It was the gray seal versus the bearded seal.
One of these days, we're just going to do it, guys. We're letting you know right now. We're just going to usurp everybody and do the gray seal. Because I know once you hear about it, it's going to be super cool.
There's so much cool stuff. But today, the bearded seals went out. And they are pretty fun, I have to say. So this week is going to be the bearded seal, and they are really funny looking. And I won't spoil it because that's Trevor's going to talk about that. But there's lots of cool stuff about these guys. So why don't we just go ahead and get straight into it? So Trevor, let's start off with where they're at and what they look like. And
yeah. So right now they're currently in basically the Arctic Circle is the general area, but they technically are part of the US because they go as far south as Bristol Bay of Alaska. So of all these like marine mammals that are protected under the Marine Mammal Protection Act, a ton of them are just Alaska.
Right.
But basically imagine the Arctic Circle at the top of the earth and then going towards the equator, but not far. So Bristol Bay, I can never pronounce this right. Sea of Okhotsk.
Yeah, that's a hard one.
It's a sea in Russia. So
one of the seas up there.
Yeah, one of the Russian seas about the same latitude, but that's as far south as they go in the Pacific and as far south as Labrador in the Atlantic.
All right.
Yeah.
That
being said, there's been a few seen in China and Japan. Kind of like, we have, Guadalupe fur seals here. That's about as far north as they go.
True.
And of course, there's been vagrants just like our beluga, but there's been vagrants in Portugal and Spain. So they've been seeing that far south before.
Wow. Okay. So they get around. Those individuals that are the weirdos that we've talked about many times on many different podcasts, because there's always some.
Basically, imagine where ice is up north.
Yeah.
There. Yeah.
They do love the ice. Well, they are it's the 4 species of basically ice seals, the Arctic seals that they call ice seals.
Yeah. So appearance-wise, there's what we call the northern seals. It's kind of a general term. It's also known as phocinae, which includes them, the bearded, or the bearded seal, the harp seal, the hooded, the ribbon, the gray, the harbor, the spotted, the Caspian, the ringed, and the Baikal seal.
Right.
They're bigger than all of them. So they're considered the largest northern seals, what that is.
Okay, yeah, because they're saying that they were I thought they saw the biggest Arctic seal, and then that makes sense that it would be the biggest of the northern.
And then if you include the others that are technically in that.
Right.
Yeah.
Phocinae would be family.
Family. Okay. Thank you. And there were more, but they're extinct. So
they don't count.
Those are the extent ones. But size-wise, they can get up to 950, which is kind of pounds, which is kind of crazy. But generally, they're like anywhere between 450 and 850. But I think that was the upper range.
Right. Like what's the max that we've seen?
Right. And going off of that, 8 foot 10 inches is the longest one I could find for lengthwise, which is probably the same weight too. But generally 6 to 8 feet in general, with the females being generally larger. General.
Right.
Again, it's harder to study them when they're not exactly accessible.
Right. Well, just live on ice floes all the time. It's totally fine.
Right. Color-wise, they're really, really rarely spotted. They're usually just a solid color. That color being grayish brown-ish. But sometimes they have some reddish brown on their neck or face.
I'm going to tell you why.
Oh, there you go. Great. And then I guess a unique aspect of them, obviously I'll get to the bearded part, but actually I'll leave that for Kat for the fun facts. But they're called the bearded seal because their whiskers are super long and bushy. and numerous. And
Very
when
long.
they dry out, they tend to curl, and it looks like a beard.
Mm-hmm.
It's the name, bearded seal. But
Yes.
what I like about them is they're also known as the square flipper seal.
Oh yeah.
Like their flippers are just like little boxes, little squares. Not
Yep.
very long. They're just little
Very
squares.
flat. They're like flat on the top. I'm like,
Yeah. But they also have super long claws on those flippers and the back flippers as well. So that's a unique aspect of them too.
mm. Well, more so like seals in general will have those front flipper ones, or the back. Which ones the sea lions don't have?
The sea lions have claws, just not very long compared to seals. But these guys are especially long.
Especially long.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
But yeah, bearded seal is kind of hard to misidentify with the bearded whiskers.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is true.
I don't know if you were leaving it, but they're tiny head.
Oh yeah, it's like turtle head. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kat had said it was like they have small heads. I'm like, okay, sure, they got small heads. And then I looked up the picture and I'm like, oh my God, it looks like a harbor seal head was put on like an elephant seal body. Like it's this giant fat body and this tiny little head and this really big beard. So
yeah.
They're pretty adorable. If you haven't looked them up, you should go look them up because they're pretty adorable.
I feel like they look like little old men. Like
they do.
Like with
they
a
look
big
like
beard.
jowly men. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, it's so funny.
Anyway, that's what I had for them for description and range.
All right.
Cool.
Well, they are super, super adorable. You do definitely need to look them up because their beard, like those whiskers are so long, like very, very, you can see them from far away. Like, oh, that's them. So let me pull up, they had some fun stuff. So those whiskers that we were just talking about aren't just for looks. It's not just for the beauty of looking like a beard. They are actually quite important, very sensitive, as many of those whiskers are, and lots of seals have those, whiskers that they are sensitive, but I think these are particularly sensitive in comparison. And they use them to find their food. And so they feed on the bottom. So a lot of the times they'll go down and be kind of, I guess, for lack of a better word, snuffling around the seafloor. And similar, there's a lot of correlation with walruses that they might be, I think, we don't know. There was one that was said it for sure. Then others were like, they may be like walruses. I don't know how much we know particularly about exactly how they feed, but they use a combination of water jetting and suction to pull the food out. And then the whiskers would be,
just like walrus.
Right. Yeah. So they said the whiskers were maybe used like walruses, where they filter out and try to find those small little pieces and then suck them up like walruses do.
Yeah. Cool. Wow. Yeah. So it's almost like baleen for seals, kind of.
Yeah, kind of. Like, let me just get this out of here. And they go, all right, that was good. Delicious.
That's cool.
I like that, baleen for seals. So when they're feeding on the bottom, they feed on a lot of invertebrates. So shrimp, crab, clams, whelks. So that was an interesting one. But they'll also feed on fish like cod and sculpin, those kind of more bottomy fish type things. And so here's where it comes in why some of those animals that Trevor just talked about have the brown or rust color on their face. So you'll see them have it on their face and flippers. And the reason why they have this is because there's iron compounds that are in the substrate, the sediment where they're feeding. And then it sticks to the hairs when they feed. And so as they're snuffling around the bottom, it just sticks to the hairs and it gives them that rust color on their faces.
That's cool.
Yeah. And they know that that's what it's from because when they molt, they're no longer rust colored. So remember, all seals molt, and so they lose their hair and they get a new coat, basically. And so that goes away when they have a nice newly molted coat.
So it does stick for that length of time. It doesn't come off after just like, oh, it's like some dust and then comes off when they haul out.
So you know what, I suppose it could, but they probably are down feeding so much that even if some of it comes off, they still have more on there, and then it may just accumulate too, where it just doesn't wash off as easily. So yeah, cool. And I guess if they're saying it doesn't go off till it's molting, I think it does stick for whatever reason.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. So they dive, but they don't dive super deep. They tend to like to they They usually dive less than 325 feet. And they like to forage in less than 650 feet where they can reach the bottom. And I equate this to like when I go swimming, especially like in the in pools and even in the ocean to some degree. I like to be able to see the bottom, so you can see what's below there. maybe they're like that too. But they can dive deeper. The record dive was over 1,600 feet. So.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm not sure why that seal was doing that in particular. But again, those weirdos that just want to show up what's normal.
Swimming away from an organ, maybe.
Oh, there you go. That could, or exactly. So as we kind of already said, they like ice. So they like sea ice. So sea ice is that ice that's not attached to land. Land would be shore fast ice that's attached to land. So it's these big kind of floating, moving ice, large chunks and small chunks that they like to be around. They can, so any animals that are up there in the ice, they need to be able to have breathing holes if it's large sheets of ice. And so many animals up there can make their own breathing holes, and they can as well. They can use their head and their claws to do so, but they really would rather not. It's not like ring seals that maintain these breathing holes. They would much rather have just areas that have natural openings that they can use. Which, if I was a seal, that's what I would do too. That seems like less work.
Me too. Or just be the one that goes to Portugal.
I would be a bearded seal on that.
Right. So mostly they're found on that sea ice, but they can be found on that shore fast ice that's attached to land, or on land. They've even seen them up rivers. For example, rivers that go out into the tributaries or end up in like Hudson Bay. So they can do crazy things like go to Japan too. So they've got options, but mainly they like that sea ice. Now the sea ice is, I think, somewhat strategic in at least their evolution, because it gives them a little bit of protection from their main predator, which are polar bears. So if you're out and away from the land where polar bears are, and they will come out onto ice, but usually that's I think the shore fast ice that is still attached. So being out away from them is probably a good idea. And they'll whelp, nurse, molt, and rest all on these ice floes. And I thought this was really funny that we've talked about a lot of pinnipeds and they've never called it whelping before, or at least that I've seen. And whelping is pupping. That's what you say for dogs, like they whelp. And seals are related to dogs, in the grand scheme of things. But I thought it was funny that I don't know why this seal in particular, they called it whelping, but I've never seen it that way anywhere else.
Who knows?
So they do all those things on that sea ice, and they may even sunbathe and bask on the sea ice after their molt, because it makes the molting possibly easier. It increases their temperature so that they can, I guess that helps. I don't know. I don't molt, so I don't know.
Really?
Yeah. So let's see. So what's interesting is these are mainly solitary seals. So if you're solitary and you don't have the safety in numbers, you need to have some other way to help protect yourself from predators. And so what they do is when they are resting on these ice floes, they will be laying there with their heads facing down towards the water. So they're basically always in a position to just go sloop and slide right back into the water. And they said that they can hear and smell what's behind them, and then they can see what's in front of them. So it gives them kind of a 360 and gives them that quick escape that they would be good. You don't want to be eaten. So that is, let's see, a lot of their behavior. They do have good vision and hearing and a moderate sense of smell, they said. So they've been seen sleeping in open water where they hang vertically and have their heads towards the surface, which I feel like
I'm not gonna have any fun facts left for you guys. That's it.
Oh no! Well, you didn't tell us which ones you had.
No, that's fine. I have more, but I'm just okay. Counting them off. I don't repeat myself.
Oh no. Well, what do you have about the vocalizations?
A little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll do a light one on that one. They do. They are. Well, I'll just say that they are very vocal, and they have songs that they sing. And I will let a cat do more on that. But it's a really interesting part. And I will link. I have a link to you can hear the sounds. So I'll link that in the show notes. It's really cool. So the things that eat them are polar bears, but also walruses, killer whales, and Greenland sharks. Which I thought was cool.
A walrus would?
Yeah, apparently. Yeah. So mainly the juveniles and the pups for those guys, for the walruses, killer whales, and sharks. But yeah, they apparently will. Who knew? So reproduction wise, they can live up to 25 years. But they become sexually mature about 5 to 6 for females and 6 to 7 for males. They are like other pinnipeds in that they have that delayed implantation. So they are gestation for about 8.5 months with a delayed implantation of like 2.5 months. So they're mating all at the same time. Do you have anything? Oh, this is gonna be weird. Do you have anything about nipples, Kat?
I did.
Okay,
I did.
I will not say
that was my thing too that I hid.
Yeah, right. So I will leave that out. But just know there's something about their nipples. It's weird.
Which that's a hook right there. If nothing else gets you to listen to the end of the episode, that'll be
right.
It right there.
That's gonna be it. That's definitely gonna be it. It does look like fighting is involved with the males, and they return to specific breeding territories. And that will link back to vocalizations and the nipples later. They give birth to 1 pup, usually on that ice between March and May. They generally choose the small ice floes because that further protects them from polar bears, because polar bears are less likely to jump off the floes and try to go get them. They nurse for 24 days, a rough 18 to 24, roughly about that time. Within a few days, the pups spend half their time in the water. And there was one that said like it was swimming after 2 hours or something like that. There was a study done. Yeah, it was really quick. And within a week, they can dive up to 200 feet. So I guess you kind of have to, because if you fall off an ice floe.
I was going to say, especially up there, like they don't get the extended period on land that a lot of other seals would have. So
exactly. Yeah. So, and you're safe on land. Like you're not going to fall into the ocean if you're on the shore, but that you might fall into the ocean if you're on an ice floe.
Right.
As with many of those foetid seals, especially the shorter amount of time you have to nurse, the greater amount of fat in your milk will be. So these guys have about a 50% milk fat, which I thought was interesting, is the same as harbor seals. They also have about 50%. But they gain up to 7 pounds a day. Because again, you're having that. But what's interesting about these guys is that, so for example, compared to like the elephant seal that is just popped over here in our area, the elephant seals don't forage while they're nursing. So the mother fasts, but these guys, the bearded seals, the mother forages while she's nursing. And so it has this cover time where the pups are actually learning how to feed, presumably from their moms. So it's a different strategy in that some seals go, you're done nursing, learn it all on your own. And then others are like, well, I'll teach you something before I head off. So I think that is my main thing. We'll talk about the other stuff that Kat's going to talk about in a minute. But yeah, so they are pretty cool, very interesting guys. And we will, of course, be getting next into the threats and status, population status, and of course, those fun facts, whatever we've left Kat for. But we'll be back right after a quick break. All right, we are back, and now it's Kat's turn to make us sad and then make us happy again.
I like that I get to take you all on an emotional arc every time.
Right, emotional roller coaster.
So first of all, let's talk about the status. So we do have an estimated approximately 500,000 is the current estimate However, as Trevor alluded to earlier, because these guys live in the Arctic and they live on ice, we basically have no idea.
Right.
So there's
a really good guess.
Yeah, that's a good guess. There's no accurate population count available. We do have some more specific counts for specific subpopulations and things like that, where they're a little bit closer to people. Right. But yeah, basically that's a rough estimate. And as Trevor again mentioned, the Alaska stock is the only bearded seal stock within the US waters. So in terms of their status currently, they are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act for, and again, I apologize, I'm going to butcher these names. So for specific subpopulations. So for the Beringia subpopulation and the Okhotsk, that I can never say the sea in Russia, right. Those two populations are listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act, protected by the Marine Mammal Protection Act throughout its range. And again, those two specific populations, the Beringia and the Okhotsk, I apologize for my terrible way of pronouncing that, they are listed as depleted. So those two specifically are more in danger than the other ones. In terms of their threats, so Cindy already mentioned one, which is predation. So that's kind of naturally, that's sort of their main threat out in the wild is polar bears, killer whales. Again, like you said, occasionally walruses or Greenland sharks as well. Subsistence harvest. So this is actually one that they are taken for subsistence in several parts of their range. The US specifically does prohibit killing of bearded seals for harvest. But like I said, that this does still go on in other parts of their range.
But they're like, we're not allowed in general to take any marine mammal, but there are like gray whales and some other certain whales that are able to be taken by native peoples. So they are not even, they don't have that exemption.
They're not. No, I didn't see anything that said that they were. I'm not sure why specifically. Maybe that's just not something that is part of their cultural practice.
Right. Yeah. The different cultures are the one. Yeah. Different.
U.S. waters.
Right.
So I mean, obviously, this is only within the part that the U.S. can control.
Right.
But yeah, that's a good point. I'm not quite sure on that. However, they did note that there is no significant commercial harvest at this point. So while there are some subsistence harvests being done, it's likely a fairly small portion of the population. So that's continuing in the parts of the range where that's traditionally done, and that's not seen to be a threat as far as we know at this point. In terms of like a major impact on the population. However, right. I would argue that since we don't actually have a good population count,
that's what to say.
Maybe it's the best idea, but I mean, again, it's a cultural tradition. So
right. Well, and that's the thing too, is you're saying like these ones are threatened or depleted. And I was like, okay, well, they're closer to humans, so that kind of makes sense. But do we really know if the other ones are threatened or depleted because they're so far away and we don't have a good handle on what their population?
Yeah, so it's always something to bear in mind. And just in terms of why they are specifically targeted by those subsistence hunts, it's basically their skin is really thick and it's a lot tougher than many of the other seal species found in the Arctic Circle. So apparently it's very good for making things like shoes or boat covers or tent covers because it's just really hardy.
Interesting.
And takes a long time to wear through. So,
and that's not one that I've really ever heard. Generally, it's the fluffier ones because they've got more fur and they're warmer. But that would make a lot of sense. It's kind of harsh environment up there. You'd want to have something that can withstand. Yeah.
So this is basically like a quality leather is what you'd be using it for. So there's that, and then on obviously, climate change is one of the main threats for these guys. So again, I feel like we talk about this on every single podcast, but like Cindy mentioned, yeah, I know. I just record myself on one of these podcasts. This section, climate change. Cue my intro on climate change. But yeah, basically because these guys do rely on sea ice for all the things that Cindy already mentioned: haul out, berthing, molting, resting. Obviously, if that platform is removed, that's a huge impact on not only the existing population, but future generations as well. And again, as we've talked about on a few episodes previously with Arctic species, as sea ice continues to decline, there are growing concerns about the increases in ship traffic up there too. Once those pathways become open to larger ships, any kind of additional noise in the environment is going to become more and more of an issue as more ships use that as a kind of bypass of other routes. And then again, oil and gas exploration up there is also a problem potentially for not only the noise factor of that development happening, but also the potential for spills and accidents and stuff like that that could release toxins or oil itself into the environment.
So the one with going back to the climate change one, I initially was like, oh, well, if the sea ice breaks up more and they can still use the smaller ice floes, that actually protects them from polar bears on one end. But then also if there's few of those left, then they may be going closer to shore, which then puts them in the thing for polar bears. So
right. And I mean, it's not just the polar bear element that you're thinking of either. It's also using those platforms for all of those other,
right,
life history necessities basically. So again, if you oftentimes those smaller flows are flimsier, for lack of a better word. So again, if you're trying to be on them for a long period of time, or you're trying to pup on them, or it might not be as stable even for the animal all out. Or again, if you have a population all trying to hop on one tiny ice floe,
right. Who wins?
Yeah.
Like the Titanic, right? I mean, like when everybody's on the like what's his name is on the door and you can't hold on, and there's only so much that people can get on.
Yeah. And I mean, that's interesting bringing it back to the polar bears, because again, I mean, yes, they are a predator of bearded seals, but in the polar bears' defense, I mean, they are also starving right now because of the breakup of the sea ice, and they can't get out to reach some of these common prey items that they use. So
they get stuck out. I've seen pictures, they get stuck out there and then the ice breaks off earlier than they're planning on it, and then they have to swim back to shore, and they
don't always make it. Yeah. It's pretty it's not so before into the fun stuff to raise everybody up again, I did just want to comment, because this is something I was not personally aware of. So apparently there is an ongoing UME of bearded seals. So an unexpected mortality event. From 2018 to currently. Since June 2018, there have been an increased number of strandings that occur in the Bering and Chukchi seas in Alaska. And this is not limited to bearded seals. This is what they call like ice seals in general. So it includes bearded seals in this. So it also included the ringed seals and the spotted seals up there as well. And so apparently there's so far a total of 106 bearded seal strandings that have occurred. And they still don't actually know what's causing it. It's been all age classes of seals. I think they were
viruses or bacteria that they found.
They did find some bacterial load in some of the animals. So they're investigating that right now to see if that could be a factor. But I just wanted to include that because that was not something that I was aware of. And that's been like 4 years now.
Oh my God. So I'm still thinking, I'm like, that was 2 years ago.
Because the last 2 years didn't happen.
The last 2 years didn't happen. Yeah, exactly. But that's interesting because it kind of coincides with the gray whale UME. That was what, did it start in 2018 or 2019?
I think 2019, if I'm not
2019.
One of those years, one of the two.
Yeah, is close around there. So I mean, not that they would be connected at all, but it's just interesting that maybe we have two that are happening at the same time, and we don't know again from what. Interesting.
Yeah. So just something to keep an eye on. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, now we can make everybody happy again before we wrap.
Yes.
Fun facts. So like we said, they are the largest seal species in the Arctic. And I did have the pups can swim and dive more than 600 feet within hours of being born, but you already said that. So in terms of the nipples, we won't keep you in suspense any longer.
What's wrong with their nipples?
They have 4, which is very cool. So the only other seal who has 4 nipples is the monk seal. So these guys are basically, they're again, in addition to the beard, if they're flipped over and you can't see their head, you could also identify them because they're going to be the only seal on ice with 4 nipples.
4 nipples. Well, and what's interesting is they said that they're almost the brink, but they're the intermediate between the monk seal family and these northern seal, the Phocinae family. So they're like and I was like, that makes sense because they kind of have like a harbor seal head, that little tiny head on this big giant monk seal body with 4 nipples.
That's true, but it's so interesting because monk seals I think of as tropical. Like I don't think about them as anywhere close to ice. So it's just interesting that would be a transition.
That body type or whatever genetics they have works for tropical or Arctic. Who knew?
Yeah, that's really cool.
Well, and then I was talking with somebody else about it. I'm like, they have 4 nipples, and she was like, why? And if they only have 1 pup, why would you need it? And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe it was useful at some point and they just never lost them.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, that'd be really fascinating too. Like if historically were they more prone to having twins, and so that was more beneficial, and then that's just been lost over time. Or that's a really good point. I haven't even actually thought about why.
I know, right? I was like, well, I don't know. There has to be a reason for them.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, and then you already talked about them sleeping vertically, and then in terms of their acoustics, so they are very, very vocal, like Cindy already said. And one of the coolest vocalizations, so males will vocalize a lot more in mating season, obviously, which is why Cindy was going to talk about it. So very commonly, they'll kind of employ their vocal repertoire a lot more extensively during the breeding season, which happens in many marine mammals. However, their specific trill call, that specific one, can be heard up to 12 miles away for as long as 3 minutes. So it can go on for 3 minutes, 12 miles away.
It's crazy.
And can you imagine picking up a microphone and being like, what the heck is this noise? And it's a seal 12 miles away. Like,
no, I listened to the thing and I was like, this sounds like some kind of a sci-fi show that is doing some kind of weird space thing.
Yep. I remember hearing that at a conference, I think, or I forget if maybe it was in one of the lectures for my master's, I forget, but like literally it sounds like some weird like phaser thing from like a 60s sci-fi show. It's super cool.
Well, and the one that I'll link to, it's like 2 minutes and 30 seconds, like the clip, and it's just constant. And like, they had trills, moans, and groans on one thing I looked up, but then another one from the Alaskan area said trills, ascents, sweeps, and moans. So I don't know what those differences are, or if they are, or if like groans are sweeps and ascents.
Not usually. So sweeps are like you typically think of like an upsweep sound.
Yeah.
Whereas,
so I'm not sure why they had different ones there, but did you see the two that the songs, the males sing these songs and they are individually distinctive?
Ooh, there you go. That's cool.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. Like, ooh, you could tell who, and maybe the females do. Like, oh, that's Bob. Bob's doing his thing again. Shut up, Bob.
Well, and I also find it fascinating that we know this about them, given that they're so difficult to access. You know, I think it's really incredible that we actually have all this information on their acoustics.
We know very little about harbor seal mating, and they live literally right next to us on land. But they said that for these bearded seals, they advertise their either breeding condition or their aquatic territory. So they may actually have, like, instead of other seals that have land territories like elephant seals, that kind of thing, these guys would actually keep an aquatic territory, which would be interesting.
That's fascinating. And I guess it kind of makes sense if they are more solitary typically, that they would then need to use their voice more in order to attract mates and things like that.
That's true.
Because they're out in larger groups.
Yeah, if you're out in the middle of the ocean on these big, like this little seal on a tiny ice floe, how are you gonna meet your friends?
Like the whale have to do. Interesting. Right. That's super cool. Okay, and then in addition to the squared flipper seal that we already talked about, I did just want to end on their Latin name because y'all know I like doing that part.
Oh, can I do mine before? I have one more before the Latin name, because I think the Latin name is a good way to end. So the only other thing I found was interesting to feeding is that, so they can live over 25 years, but they wear down their teeth so fast that seals older than 9 rarely have teeth that extend above the gum line, so they appear toothless.
Huh.
So then why do they have teeth at all?
I don't know. I mean, I get, because they can apparently keep living for another 15 years without teeth. And if they're doing the walrus thing, like they're sucking, then they don't really need it. So again, is it just one of those things like the nipples where like, well, you have teeth, but you don't really need them, so you can use them while you have them.
That's odd.
Yeah. So then I was just like, oh my God, these are really just little old men, because they're just like these old with the big giant beard, and then they have no teeth. Like, it was so weird. Anyway, that was my only last fun fact. So
okay,
that was funny.
So with their Latin name is Erenathus Barbitus. So Erenathus meaning heavy jaw. So if you see a picture of them, they do have like quite a square jaw. Like their face actually face on looks quite different than any other seal face, really, to me. Like it is quite square jawed.
It's distinct.
And then Barbitus means bearded. So their Latin name is self-explanatory. So not a super exciting one this time, but I thought it was kind of fun because it's just very visual
Well, it's funny because sometimes they are very literal. And then other times it's like, where did that name come from? I don't know.
Right. Yeah. So there you go.
Very cool. Well, that's our cute little old bearded seal that looks, so I was also thinking when looking at the picture, I'm like, this looks like somebody photoshopped it. Like they took another little head and a different body and they just put them together. It really does look like it. So for those of you watching on YouTube, we'll have a picture of them right next to probably Cat on the screen there. And I will link to those sounds because they are fantastical.
It
really
just seems like the northern seals just look weird.
True. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and doesn't one of the other
Weird.
seals have weird sounds too up there? So they're all kind of weird. It must be the cold.
Who are we to judge?
Right.
Yep.
You know what? We do weird things too. So everybody's got their own thing. So that's it for the bearded seal this week. Next time, I think we will probably be back to a journal review. We did a few interviews the last month or two, so we'll pick out a good article to read. And then after that, we'll have another marine mammal highlight. So of course, always be sure to look at towards the beginning of the month, we'll have that Instagram and Facebook stories poll for you to help decide. But again, at some point, we're just going to tell you we're doing the gray seal and not let you choose. And you will all be happy about it. So with that note, be sure to check us out on Instagram and Facebook and our website. And if you want some cool merch, we do have that on the website as well. You can also, if you want to help us continue do this podcast, you can what's it called on Anchor? It's a support.
Yeah, support.
Yeah, you can click on and donate through there to help us keep doing these fun podcasts that hopefully you are having fun as well, as much as we are. So with that, make sure you keep up with us on social media and reach out if you have anything that you want us to talk about. Always feel free to let us know. And with that, we will see you next time. Bye.
This was brought to you by Pacific Mammal Research, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. To learn more about the species we discuss, check out our blog. Head to our website, www.pacmam.org, that's PACMAM.org, to check it out. Also, help us continue providing fun and educational content like this by donating today. Your help is how we can continue to do our work and share it with you. Thanks.